Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Vandiver. I'm the assistant to the bishop for the Metropolitan New York Synod, and I am glad to be here during our commemoration and celebration of Pride to moderate the panel entitled Queer and Faithful Race. So for the sake of time, because we don't have much, let's jump right in. I hope to speak as little as possible. So we can start with the question. We have two panelists, Reverend Kelsey Brown and Andy Jean joining us today. So let's start with each of them answering the question, who are you? Give us a quick bio and tell us about what you do in the world. And I guess we can start with Andy.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hi, I'm Andy Jean. I am a costume designer living in Brooklyn, New York. In terms of who I am an artist, but I'm also an advocate. I'm someone who fights for folks who are not able to speak up or who have fear of speaking up. And I think for me, I'm also someone who is spiritually fortified and unbothered by fragility. And so I'm really excited to be here today and to really just share our voices, but also to have and to hold space with this community. So thank you.
Pastor Kelsey.
I was going to say, does that mean I go next? So
Yes.
My name is Kelsey Brown. I'm the pastor and developer at Jehu's Table, an African descent Lutheran congregation in East New York. I am a Long Islander, a recent transplant back to my beloved New York from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I identify as queer. I'm a 20-something living in Brooklyn, and really, really excited to be a part of this panel with Andy and Kevin today.
And so for our audience today, is it appropriate to wherever you find yourself on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, is it appropriate to label folks as queer? How does that work? I mean, just for our knowledge. So how would I label the two of you, for instance, on this panel versus, how does that work?
So I think it depends for me. When I came out as a lesbian, and over the 14 years since I've come out, I've come to know myself more closely as queer. And I think of queer as other, queer as different than. And my colleagues, Andy may feel different, friends in the LGBTQIA plus community may feel different as well. Queer, the term has been used across time negatively. Many in our community have reclaimed that term. So for me, I identify as queer, and I'm fine with that language.
Yeah, I would say, thank you for sharing that, Kelsey. I think for me personally, I'm undeniably Black and trans. I definitely feel that's how I carry myself in this world, with that grace. And so I love to meet others with that grace and hope to get that reciprocated. So yeah.
Absolutely. So you are all both living in the fullness of who you are. Thank God for that. When did you first feel opposition in the world, from the world, for who you were? Either one of you can go.
I'll start. Okay. I mean, I think for me, this is no surprise, but growing up, I was Andrew. And so I was about 4 years old. And for me, the first time I felt opposition was actually from my father. And I was playing outside with our neighbors. And they had a daughter who was around my age. And she had this new, which at the time, I guess is like the life-size Barbie figurine, which had the arms and came with a set of clothes and you could brush her hair, all these things. And I was elated by this toy. And she was like, you can play and come over and dress up with us and, and dress. And so I just came over all the time. And the one particular afternoon, because my dad always worked until 8. And so he had come home early and I was so caught up outside playing with the Barbie with my friend that I didn't even hear the car pull up. And so we were just playing, and then literally I was called out for that in front of everyone. It felt terrible. I felt extremely minimalized in that moment. I didn't feel valued because I didn't know what I had did wrong, but it became very apparent in that moment that I could never play with that toy again. So that for me was the first moment that I felt that.
And how old were you?
I was 4.
4. Wow. Okay. Pastor Kelsey.
So for me, probably middle school. I've always been just like, honestly, just a little too weird of a kid. I have a soft spot in my heart for weird kids because I was that weird kid. In middle school, if you can imagine it, I also had glasses, but I had really long hair, like down to my knee butt. And I wore a pink tutu to school, like pretty frequently. I was a dancer. And I was like, oh, we're going to wear this to school. Very pretty, very fancy. And I got made fun of for that, obviously, because I was a weird kid. And very quickly, the bullying for my presentation turned into, oh, you're gay. I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know how the like pink tutu correlated into being gay, but I got myself a boyfriend very quickly and used said boyfriend as kind of my beard, which in the community is like a gay person using a relationship that looks straight passing to avoid ridicule. So I used this boyfriend for about a year. And then finally I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I was being bullied for who I was and I was tired of it. So came out freshman year of high school. But the bullying kind of stuck with me throughout high school. I was out and proud and happy and forming relationship and finding other gay people and doing all those things that young queer folk do, but still bullied. And that lingers with you, as I'm sure how beautifully Andy recounted that situation as a child. You remember those instances when it changes. So, yeah.
And for all of us, what is it like to feel like you are wrong or you are, what energy? So obviously you're in a different space today. How do you break out of that? What do you do to get to acceptance of who you are in the world and loving yourself? How do you get there?
Well, that's a great question. I would definitely say that it is not overnight. I think when you are told for so long that you're wrong, that the way that you feel is unlike God, and that you somehow do not possess, right, the love in your heart that you feel for other people. So it's extremely painful. But I can say for myself in my own personal story that I just always trusted and knew that I had a purpose, and that if I allowed for other people to deter me from that, I would just be like them. I would have still stayed home. I would have probably married a woman, and so I would have continued to live a life that was not for me, instead of following the life that was designed and divinely set out for me. So I had to actually have the faith to take a leap into the unknown, and that uncertainty actually developed and revealed to me my actual destiny. And so that is simply for me to live happy, boldly, and beautifully. So I think that is just my experience and my response to that.
You on here preaching, Andy. Lord have. Do you feel it over there, Kelsey? Do you feel it?
I sure do.
Andy
Slowly
is
but surely, I'm gonna get
preaching.
one of those glory tears. Just one singular tear is gonna drip down real quick.
She's preaching. Yes.
I'm so blessed by not only Andy's words, but by Andy's presence here with us today already. I feel enlivened by the Spirit. I think one of the joys for members of the LGBTQIA plus community is finding one another. The joy that I feel when I am with my siblings in the streets, dancing, in church, praising, out in front of the porch, sitting and having a kiki, a chat with one another, finding that community transformed my life immensely. And then being able to turn around and offer that community to other queer folk, especially folks of color, to say, I see you and your family, come over here, you have a seat at this table, has been the biggest heart transformation for me, is to say, I see you. You may not fully see yourself yet, but come over here and get some of this love that you may not be feeling other places. And being able to just create a community that is filled to the brim with love, the love that I believe that Christ Jesus gives us all, to give a counter message of hatred, to say enough with that. We've got love abundant over here.
Wow. So two threads that I'm lifting out of your conversation as we go off script. So thank you for hanging with us. The first thing is you have retooled your faith, like in some ways. Like Andy talks about the faith that she was given, as not a match to the faith that she has now. And Pastor Kelsey, you talk about, in addition to faith and love, genuine love of Christ, you talk about relationship. So these are the things that have helped and are helping you.
Yes.
To become and continue to become, right? To this state of becoming, because we all are in a state of becoming, right? But like you're saying that these are the things that have helped you to get where you are. And also, I think those relationships of love that Pastor Brown talks about are the ones that bring us to God, right? Marvelous. So we kind of, alluded to it at the beginning. You are Black women in the struggle. All right. And like womanist theologians and others talk about being doubly and triply othered, right? So it's one thing to be Black, but on top of that, it's another thing to be a woman. Then on top of that, it's another thing to be queer. It's another thing to be trans, right? So you have these intersecting components that come to coalesce and make you who you are, right? So talk about, the state of the world is not always pretty for folks with who've had their backs against the wall. When was the defining moment for you when you said, I got to do something about this?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Wow, this is incredible. I actually am so thankful for us to be able to hold space today. This actually, in this moment, is feeling extremely healing. So thank you guys for that. I would definitely say, I think when I was like 17, I had a conversation with my father, which is hard. But he wanted me to become a professional linebacker I was like, okay. So I obviously that was not my path or my ministry, and so
And
I spoke to him, and he was saying that, I'm just scared that. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
And he was saying that.
You broke up for a second. Can you start that story over? Your father said he wanted you to what now?
Absolutely. Yes. I will say that I had a conversation with my father when I was 17, and he had always wanted me to play football and become a professional linebacker for the NFL. And I was like, that's not my ministry. But I couldn't say that. And then I spoke to him about it, and he was saying that my fear is that my son will be gay, or he'll be like one of those, punks out there. And I told him, I was like, but God doesn't give fear. So I understand why you love me for me. And he couldn't answer that question. My little bag and left.
Wait a minute. Okay, so you're breaking up again. See, you're breaking up again, Andy. You're gonna have to back up and say what you said. Uh-oh.
No.
Yes, you're breaking up. Are you moving?
Okay, I'm breaking up.
Okay, so go back. So where we lost you again was you were sitting down and your dad was talking to you, and said, and you were getting ready to tell us what you said. So we don't know what your dad said, and we don't know what you said to your dad. That's what we need right now. It always cuts off at the good part. Come on.
Yes, I was. Yes. So I had a conversation with my father, and he had expressed to me that he's afraid that his son will be gay, or that he'll be one of those punks out on the street. And I said to him, God does not give us the spirit of fear. So where is your fear coming from? And I don't understand why you don't love me fully. And in that moment, I knew that, when he didn't give me a response, then I knew that the conversation was over. And so the next day, I got my little parcel together. I got my bag, and then I moved out. And I was like, I'm going to figure it out, but I knew that staying there, I would not be myself there anymore, and I could not actually become the person that I needed to be. So I had to leave. And I think for me, that was the that was the moment. That was the leaping off point where my path and my journey began.
And you said from that point on, I have to do some work now. What did you say? You muted yourself.
No, I said I apologize. I'm trying not to move too much.
Oh, it's okay.
Cut out again, so my apologies.
No, it's fine. This is the internet is kind of crazy, So that's the moment you said, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to advocate, and I'm going to. It was that spurred you on.
Correct. Yeah.
Pastor Brown.
So in the panel prior to this, I talked a little bit about my internship in Southern California, which was set apart as an internship of the ELCA for LGBTQIA+ candidates for ministry. And it was in sunny Southern California. It was beautiful, and it changed my life in so many ways. But growing up biracial, I had experienced othering of having a white mom and a black dad, parents that I love and love me. So I experienced what it looked like in the street for folks to encounter my family as other. But I had never been othered for my race before then, in real ways. When I was on internship, I walked in there with my little rainbow flag thinking, ooh, they're ready for me. I was the 6th gay intern that they had, and I was ready. And then I was verbally attacked in a meeting for being Black. And the congregation really thought that they were where they needed to be, that their welcome was wide, and that they had proven that their welcome was wide over the 6 years that they had this internship program. But I was their first intern that was a person of color. And it was in that moment that I saw a couple of things. I saw what real leadership looks like in my internship supervisor, who said, nope, that's not this. Like, whatever that is, that's not what we stand for, and that's enough of that. But then I saw the push to say, it's not just enough for us as queer folk to say, oh, we've checked the box. We're good at this ministry. That if the ministry is not intersectional, if the ministry does also not uplift folks in their full identity as women, as trans folk, as cis folk, as Black folk, then your ministry is for naught. And to say that a place as liberal as Southern California could still have to do some of this work, I wonder what that work looks like in places that are much more intentionally non-diverse. So once that instance happened, I decided to be a vocal church participant, a vocal church leader in the intersection between anti-racism work and the work of the LGBTQIA plus community. And I've been here ever since, holding those complex identities in one body and stepping out unapologetically to say, this is who I am as a pastor, as a child of God, as a human being that exists on the planet. And you take all of that when you take Kelsey.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of the times the perception is that we hold those identities in tension with each other, but I don't think that that's fair. I think that that is a way to cause division amongst people who are mutually excluded for whatever reason. And I want to say from my old church days that the devil is a liar. Like, as in, you said it when you say, I hold all of these parts of myself in a body, and I bring all of that to bear. Okay, so I want to go to both Andy and Kelsey about what that looks like, because we know you're an activist, we know you're a pastor. How does that affect your pastoral work? How you deal with people who may not know, who have questions, who may be anti in some way? How do you do that kind of work to educate and to do advocacy work?
Yeah, I would say for me, it is definitely spiritually driven. And it's driven from a place of love and authenticity. I think for so long I personally was afraid, right? That if I spoke out or if I said something wrong, that it would be misconstrued, or that I wouldn't, that my voice would not be respected. And so I think it took time to actually firmly ground myself and say, hey, you are now deeply seated in your purpose, and that what you have to say can affect and can impact someone else. So I think for me, that is like the driving force behind it. And also because I know that I have ancestors and I have the will of God inside of me. And actually more and more lately, I've been saying that I feel like the more strength I have, the more strength he gives me to continue and to do that work and that advocacy. Because I think for too long, a lot of trans communities, marginalized communities are told to be quiet, are told to just wait. And wait for what? I think like we've been waiting, and we've continued to be pushed back, continued to be sidelined, and continued to be silent. And so for me, that silence has to end.
Can I just say retweet? Y'all can just take what Andy said and apply it. No, I think there's this intense pressure in the church to be spectacular. That the folks that lead in the church, that are invited to panels, that are asked to write books and blog posts, are extraordinary. And that's not true. We are ordinary people with stories that need to be told, and I will never tire of telling the story of how Jesus brought me back to myself through other people's affirmation and love, that because of seeing myself the way that my mentors and my friends see me, that I'm able to then turn the mirror around to folks that need to hear that too. And that's the crux of the ministry that I do in regards to advocacy, is to build a more equitable world where we're not fighting for power or attention or a seat at the table, where the table is wide enough for us all, where there are many seats and many different ways for us to gather around the table. And until we're all there, until Black trans women are sitting at the front seat, then we're not all there.
Yes, yes. Andy, so what? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I was gonna say, it's so funny because I always joke about like, that we need representation and we need voices in all spectrums of our world, right? Not only in places of education, places of worship, places of leadership, even at our banks, at our schools. But I personally feel like if I don't have a seat at the table, then I'm bringing a folding chair, because I need to be heard today. Like literally, and I will not be told no. Being told no, I just feel like I have to accept your fear. I have to accept what you're putting onto me, and for what? Like at the end of the day, I'm still a Christian. I'm still a human. I'm still someone who is fighting to live. I will still fight for my community member, and I would hope that they would fight for me.
Wow. So Andy, what does your advocacy look, your work look like on the ground? So I'm gonna ask you two different questions, each of you. Andy, what is yours? How is it birthed into the world? What does your advocacy work consist of? And Pastor Brown, how small of a thing, people think that when they're doing this kind of work, advocacy work, they got to have their name in lights, as you've kind of already alluded to, this extraordinary kind of mindset. But where does it start, especially if you're a pastor and you're seeking to move your congregation forward? So that's your question. All right, Andy, you got your question? Okay.
Yes, I would definitely say, I think for me, we know that the COVID crisis kind of drove everyone into their homes, so that we could try to reduce and diminish the spread of this virus. But I think for me, seeing all of the injustices that have been happening in like the last 4 months in this country, I mean, to me, that drove me out of the house. I could only be at home and sit while folks out here in peril, while people are being shut down, while lives are taken for just existing. So for me, I felt that I could no longer accept that. And then so for me, I would definitely say that what that looks like for me is just a daily affirmation of going out and being trans folk rights are just as your right, that we should have the ability to use any restroom. We should have the ability to get a promotion with healthcare. We should have access to affordable education. We should have access to safe housing for us to have nutritious meals. This is not something that is just us versus them. I think for so long, we've created this idea of division, and that division has only pulled us apart, where I think now in this moment, in 2020, in June, we need to come closer. We need to, still socially distance, but I think we need to give a unconditional love and support to our community. And that support is not temporary. That support is move forward. We have to consider every community member. Even the folks at the bus stop, even the folks that we see on our way to work. Like, we need to acknowledge that people exist. And even if they look different from us, even if they believe different things from us, they are still human.
Amen. I think if I heard my question correctly, Kevin, it is, I think we need to start at the kitchen table. I am tired of homophobia, transphobia, hatred of any kind being allowed in communities that have been marginalized. As I hold many identities, I also acknowledge that for Black and Brown folks, especially Black and Brown folks that are queer or LGBTQIA, some of that hatred starts at home. Many people, their experience of being othered begins at their kitchen table, in their front yard, in their backyard, in the ways that they hide themselves behind bedroom doors. And I think that that's where my education piece as a pastor starts, is that until we focus on being better to our folks, like until we acknowledge that what we say on Sunday mornings, if we say all are welcome and we turn around and demean and harm our LGBTQIA folks at home, then what is this? I mean, that's honestly what it comes down to. So I think the very beginning, the seed of the work happens at home. And then that it trickles out into how we exist in the world, whether that is how we exist in the medical field to make sure that all of our siblings have access to adequate healthcare, not just healthcare, adequate healthcare, which affirms and confirms exactly who they are, and housing, food insecurity, things like that. Those are important work. Those are work on the ground that I am thankful that siblings like Andy are out confirming and affirming and doing that work. Where I see the work starting for me on a pastoral level is speaking to my folks about the ways in which we need to do this from the minute we wake up until the minute we go to sleep, and that work starts at home, then trickles out into our schools, where we affirm to our youth that they are holy just as they are, that work then continues as they go on to higher education, and breaking the cycle of harm that happens at home is the work that I feel called to do. It's work that brings me joy, because I don't want any other child harmed for being who they are, especially at home.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, Kelsey, that is, like, I'm literally writing things down as well, because this is so amazing. I would definitely say, like, to your point, is that kitchen table talk is something that is so integral to Black culture. Like even going to the barbershop, right? To me, which is something that is so like vestigial, and it's something that is part of our culture, part of our upbringing. But in those same days, a lot of community members they don't feel safe there. Like they don't feel like they can actually be their full selves in a barbershop, right? Where the atmosphere feels toxic, feels extremely overtly masculine, and if you do not show that level of manliness, right, or assertiveness, then somehow you are seen as weak. So for me, I would love to even push those conversations into the barbershops, right? Where like men of our community, young men, old men, where there's actually this intersection of community, of ages, we all come here and to help groom ourselves. But we can also groom our mind, and also groom the way that we think about women, the way that we think about folks who are different than us, and who may wear different things than us, but we still have to have a bit of respect. And then the last thing I was going to say is something for me that I always remember from church anyways, right, is that we have to preach tolerance. And personally, I mean, and I'm not trying to offend, but for me, the time for tolerance is over. Tolerance to me doesn't get to the root of what we need to do. Tolerance does not acknowledge everyone that's here. Tolerance does not feed ourselves and nourish our spirits, because tolerance is just like, well, I will allow you to come here, but you do not have a space in my heart.
I would totally agree with that. I think that tolerance to me means, I mean, one of my professors has written a book about tolerance as a virtue, and I think he's trying to reimagine it, but from just the basic understanding of tolerance is, I need to convince you that I am worthy to be in this space, and I'm sick of asking people to tolerate me. I definitely, I hear that, and what I also hear is this new hermeneutic, this reimagining of theology, and ironically enough, um, we should ask the question: do we feel like we are where we need to be theologically, when it comes to creating love and teaching people that they are God's children and that they belong no matter what? Are we there yet? And if not, what do we need to continue to do to get there?
I don't know if we'll ever be there. I think, and this upsets folks, so be upset with me. Until we remove or add to the notion that Jesus is white, until we add, looking behind you, Kevin, the plethora of icons that you have that show folks that look like us, until those are seen as just as valid depictions of the divine, we will continue to have work to do. I preach frequently about the fact that Jesus probably had really curly hair and dark skin, and his feet probably really hurt from walking around all the time. When we acknowledge that Jesus can look a variety of ways to a variety of people, when we stop uplifting queer texts as just the texts that tell people that they're welcome, and instead turn our theological lens to stories of the Ethiopian eunuch, of David who danced wildly, of Ruth and Naomi and their intimate intertwining of relationship, until we start to theologically look at those stories as stories of us, as folks with ambiguity of a plethora of identities, then we'll continue to have to do this work. I cannot wait for the day that a child that looks like me, looks like Andy, looks like you, Kevin, can open scripture and imagine for themselves their bodies walking around in time and place next to Christ. That, I think, is when the work might be close to being done. I don't think it'll be done till Jesus himself walks back here and brings us all to himself. But that's the hope.
Oh, I love that hope. That's a little hope that I want to believe in. I mean, that's what I would subscribe to that. I would also say that I think for me, community is expansive, and community is not just within our own personal circle, our own personal bubble. And I think where we need to be is a place that allows for intersectionality, but that respects those moments as well. That because this is different or feels foreign to us, that we do not write it off, that we do not cast it out or throw it out because it's not familiar. And so I think for me, that is something that needs to happen. For me, that is something that is part of the language of reimagination. We have to reimagine that ourselves in a likeness of God, that we can be in different ways, that even in that idea, a vision, that we can also be expansive. So for me, I feel like it's something that is a ongoing thing. And I think until we can all actually say, as a community, we all feel that we have to take this step together. And unfortunately, I just know that there are folks, even in my own family, who are like, what is going on? Why do we have to do this? I thought this is, and so it really just becomes about minimizing, antagonizing, instead of evangelizing. So I think for me, in those moments, I feel like, okay, today's not the day. Today may not be the day, and I'll try again tomorrow. So yeah.
We're coming down to the end of our time. We have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to try to get in 2 more questions. The first question is this. You have a megaphone to the world. How can, Kelsey, specifically for you, how can the church stand up and support you in your work? Andy, how can we support you in your work in New York coming up? What are your ideas on that?
How you can support me, how the church can support me, is by listening to Black trans women. There is no doubt in my mind that the movement for LGBTQIA rights as we know it today would not exist without the voices, bodies, spirits, souls of Black trans folk. And I think that for me, a church that believes and loves and works for change in the same ways that Andy does is a church that I am proud to be a part of. I think that our synod is getting there. Our synod has done a lot of work to look outward. And I think that following the voices of our trans siblings, specifically trans women of color, is how we fully see the kingdom of God fleshed out among us.
Thank you, Kelsey. I agree. I wholeheartely agree. And I feel that what the community and the church can do, for me personally, is to listen. But also to listen with their hearts, and to listen and to challenge the things that maybe you were told, challenge things that you were led to believe, challenge things that you feel, this is not right. Why does it not feel right to you? Is it because you have a preconceived notion of what a man and a woman should be? Do you have preconceived notions of what roles and responsibilities are when they are assigned to gender? Do we have notions that allow us to always stay down instead of actually uplifting each other and uplifting our other members in the community? This morning, I feel really weird because I hear that a 17-year-old Black trans woman was killed, Brayla Stone. And so for me, it's like, okay, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. Until we can live in a world where Black and brown trans people are not attacked, are not always becoming victims, are not always becoming hashtags, that they can live past the life expectancy of 35. For me, that is when we can actually start to make change and to make progress. So for me, what the church can do is to be better people. And to always lead with love instead of necessarily what I think we are traditionally and holistically kind of led to believe. But I know that each person has their own personal journey. But for me, if I'm thinking about love, when I think about God's love, to me, that love is expansive. It's more than inclusive. It's equal. Thank you.
That's so great for all of you. I'd like to thank you for your time. I do want to acknowledge that you are participating in this time together during a pandemic, which is already difficult. You know, we're not face to face. We are virtual, and it takes a lot of energy to give of yourselves as it is, but to do so during this time of great trauma speaks to your power, your strength, your resilience. And I'm just so grateful to know you. And I want to extend love and grace to both of you. Thank you so much for participating in this panel. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, we need to find each other on Twitter.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh, how do I?
Me too. I think we're supposed to be quiet. Let's chat.